Welcome to today's show. Before we get started, let me just say thank you for tuning in and ask you to do me a big solid by clicking the follow or subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. Also, visit the website at secondlookcinema.net, where you can access transcripts of each episode and even submit an idea for a film to cover in a future episode. Now, onto the show. Groundhog Day is a 1993 film where Bill Murray plays Phil Connors, a weatherman with the charm of a wet sock. He gets stuck reliving the same miserable February 2nd in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. At first, he reacts like any normal person would, by being a total degenerate, indulging in crime, gluttony, and general douchebaggery. But after countless repeats and even more failed attempts at seducing Andie MacDowell, he eventually learns the true meaning of life: self-improvement, kindness, and not being an insufferable narcissist. Only then does the time loop let him go, because even the universe has limits on how long it can tolerate Phil Connors. And now for the film 5. 5 behind-the-scenes tidbits you should know about the making of Groundhog Day. Fact 1. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis had a falling out. Director Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, who had been longtime collaborators, a la Ghostbusters and Stripes, had a major falling out during the filming due to creative differences. Murray wanted the film to be more philosophical, while Ramis leaned toward comedy. Their feud lasted over 20 years before they reconciled shortly before Ramis' death. Fact 2. The groundhog bit Bill Murray multiple times. The real star, Punxsutawney Phil, actually played by several groundhogs, was not a fan of Murray. During the driving scene, the groundhog bit him so hard that Murray had to get rabies shots. Fact 3. Tom Hanks was almost Phil Connors. The studio originally considered Tom Hanks for the lead role, but Harold Ramis thought Hanks was too nice and audiences wouldn't buy his transformation from jerk to decent human being. Enter Bill Murray, the perfect lovable grump. Fact 4. It took forever to nail the time loop length. The original script had Phil stuck in the loop for 10,000 years, based on the idea that it takes that long to become a master at something. Ramis later said he thought it was more like 30 or 40 years, though the film never states it outright. Fact 5. The film wasn't shot in Punxsutawney. Despite the film's setting, Groundhog Day was actually filmed in Woodstock, Illinois. The town still celebrates the movie with an annual event, and you can even visit the famous puddle Phil Connors steps in. The film Groundhog Day from 1993 means far more to me than just a classic performance by Bill Murray, or that it's another romantic comedy and yet a seemingly endless stream of same old romantic comedy tropes. Everything from its voraciously quotable lines to its music, and even the way the ensemble cast gels together so well in each scene they share, it all adds up to something personally powerful. Something far more meaningful than what most audiences give it credit for, and perhaps something more akin to what Murray was expecting from Ramis at the outset, that later became a source of frustration between the two and caused a rift that killed the comedic spirit of them both, thereby creating a loss for us as the audience. No, Groundhog Day is not just another romantic comedy. It's a deeper, sometimes very humorous look at our mundane lives, our frustration at not getting ahead to where we think we should be, and how love isn't something earned. It's instead birthed from our experiences that shape our desires and then, ultimately, our connections with others. Sound a little too deep for a comedy with kisses? Yeah, and it's worth every trip I take with it each year. And not necessarily a trip I take on February 2nd. At the beginning of Groundhog Day, Phil Connors is the embodiment of arrogance. He's dismissive of others, sees his job as beneath him, and treats people as mere background characters in his own life. In other words, he's every one of us that's been put through the ringer over and over again, only to have one last person, one last boss, one last family member hit that little red button inside of us. After all, one can only hold back so long and take a beating before the once beloved nicest person in the world becomes self-absorbed to bridge the deficit. Ever wonder why there's so few people out there in the world that are genuinely nice? Here's your answer. We wear people's emotions, tolerances, and patience down to a nub before giving them a swift kick in the pants over a cliff, not unlike the one Phil and Punxsutawney Phil go over in the film. Connors, played expertly by Murray, travels to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania with an air of superiority, mocking the town and its traditions. His interactions with his co-workers, including the kind and patient Rita, reveal his selfishness and lack of empathy. Why? Because by this point, Phil has been beaten into submission by the same society that he wanted to be a part of once. Now, he hates the system and trusts no one except his own instincts. They, at least, are honest, even if they are self-serving. When Phil finds himself trapped in a time loop, reliving the same day over and over, his initial response is one of frustration and confusion. However, instead of using this mysterious occurrence as an opportunity for growth, he indulges in his hedonistic pleasures. He exploits his knowledge of the day's events to manipulate people, engage in reckless behavior, and satisfy his own desires without consequences. This stage of the film highlights the emptiness of selfish gratification. Despite having the freedom to do whatever he wants, Phil remains unfulfilled and trapped, not just in time, but in his own miserable existence. Phil goes from selfish to confused to frustrated, then to finally understanding the system and its rules. He learns how to manipulate it and finally gets something out of it. But he realizes over time that despite bending those rules or breaking them for his own benefits, the same old creeps in, and having everything suddenly means having nothing. After exhausting every form of self-indulgence, here he reaches a breaking point. He realizes that no matter what he does, he'll always wake up to the same day. His arrogance begins to give way to despair as he repeatedly tries and fails to escape the time loop through increasingly desperate means, including suicide. And here, more than anything, despite the laughs we take at Phil's expense, is where some of the deeper meaning reveals itself to us. The first attempt Phil makes to end his life is in the red truck after hijacking Punxsutawney Phil, the titular Groundhog. The two Phils hit the gas and drive the truck over a cliff. At first, according to Larry the cameraman, he might be okay. Then the truck explodes, to which Larry quickly replies, "Well, no, not now." But let me posit an idea here. What if the Groundhog Phil represents the other side of Phil Connors himself? One is a Phil that has given up on everything, and the other Phil, the Groundhog Phil, represents the Phil that once was idealistic, upbeat, and wanting to make a positive change through something he did. What if both sides of Murray's character, represented by a man and a marmot, died that day? And when Phil loses that idealistic side of himself that day in the explosion, he begins a journey that ultimately leads to him dying to himself and allows him to become the man he was supposed to be. A rebirth, if you will. Visually and through dialogue, Phil's real transformation begins when he shifts his focus from himself to others. He starts to use his knowledge of the day's events not for personal gain, but to help people. He saves a man from choking, catches a boy falling from a tree, and helps various townspeople in small but meaningful ways. In doing so, he discovers a sense of purpose that was missing in his previous self-centered existence. Central to this change is his evolving relationship with Rita. Initially, he sees her as another prize to be won, attempting to manipulate her into loving him. However, when he finally lets go of his selfish motivations and simply appreciates her for who she is, he experiences genuine connection. Rita represents the kind of love that cannot be forced or faked. By the end of the film, Phil's transformed from a bitter, selfish man into someone who genuinely cares for others. His repeated experiences in the time loop have taught him patience, humility, and the value of love. It's only when he fully embraces selflessness and lives a day completely devoted to others that he's finally freed from the loop. And at that moment, it's where I lose my self-control and a tear or two fall. The story of someone self-absorbed beyond belief, so much so that they miss the very beautiful and wondrous things all around them, is humbled enough to the point that they can once again see the value in the things around them and the things they've been blessed with. That's powerful, effective storytelling, and it breaks me every time I view the film. It's so sincere here, despite the silliness that precedes it. The lines that grab me most are the lines that he whispers to Rita as she falls asleep beside him, reading her poetry. That's the Phil Connors before society beat him to pieces. One last thing that gets me subtly each viewing: the power of a woman to lead a man to better understand what he's capable of and just how good he can be. Healing through love and acceptance. Rita's acceptance of Phil's genuine change is proof positive that love knows no bounds. Phil's escape is not about winning or achieving some external goal. It's about his internal transformation. He's learned to love others more than himself, and in doing so, he's found true happiness. The time loop, which once felt like a prison, was actually a gift, an opportunity to become the best version of himself. Just like the tragedies, the traumas, and the frustrations we all have in our lives from time to time. They feel like prisons, inescapable. But by not giving up and seeing things sometimes painfully to the end, only then do we get a chance to see the bigger picture. Of course, there are times where we don't see the bigger picture, even though we push through and persevere. But perhaps someone saw us keep trying and keep moving forward despite our obstacles, physical or emotional, and was inspired by them, which led to someone else being the positive change the world needed. Groundhog Day serves as a powerful allegory for the human experience. We're often trapped by our own bitterness, arrogance, and selfishness, repeating the same mistakes until we learn the lesson we need to grow. The film suggests that true fulfillment comes not from indulging our every desire, but from learning to love and serve others. Whether it's February 2nd when you come across this podcast episode or the middle of summer, I challenge you to take a second look at Groundhog Day. Get a box of pastries, the ones that Larry would stare at. Grab a book of French poetry, a warm blanket, and, if you get really excited, make noises like a chipmunk. settle in and see beyond the laughs. Thank you for listening today. As always, watch films deeper, listen closer, and search for a deeper meaning than what's on the surface. I'll see you next time.